Greetings, fellow gamers! I'm the Soulsborne Seeker, and today I'll be reviewing Bow, Path of the Teal Lotus, an action platformer Metroidvania game developed by Squid Shock Studios and released on the 17th of July 2024 for PC, Nintendo Switch, PS5, as well as the Xbox Series X and Series S. The game's story transpires in a mysterious land inspired by Japanese folklore and brimming with the culture's myths and legends. You take on the role of Bow, a celestial blossom that descends from the heavens in order to undertake a treacherous journey that's meant to fulfill a mysterious ancient prophecy which is somehow tied to the survival of the world. A journey that will bring you face to face with primordial creatures beyond your understanding. The narrative incorporates many extraordinary entities and symbols from Japan's folktales and mythology, and is mainly presented via dialogue, brief cutscenes, and environmental storytelling. It does feature a few twists and turns here and there, but is largely straightforward, though that's not to say that it wasn't enjoyable. On the contrary, I found the almost fairy tale-like quality of this story to be incredibly alluring, something that I believe is largely owed to the game's presentation, which incorporates colorful hand-drawn visuals that reminded me of watercolor art and did an amazing job of fleshing out the setting and immersing me in its beautiful vistas. Speaking about setting, the world of Bow, Path of the Teal Lotus features a magnificent map to explore that is home to a variety of different biomes, from verdant forests and icy peaks all the way to musty burrows and the lively Sakura town, among others. All of them presented in the aforementioned visually stunning art style that gives everything an almost dreamlike quality. If there is one sour note to mention here, is that I would have liked a few more biomes to explore, though I think that complaint is born from my pleasure of investigating this mystical land. On the topic of exploration, I'm pleased to say that the game's world is filled to the brim with a variety of different secrets, with the main collectibles that you will need to discover being segregated into kodama, large floating lanterns, crafting material, charms, and quest items. Kodama are tiny adorable creatures that you must find and send back to the main city, which can then be utilized in order to build new shops and houses, gaining access to additional helpful upgrades by doing so. The large floating lanterns contain spirit points, which are the game's main currency and can be used to purchase new items and upgrades. Crafting material is necessary in order to upgrade your weapon, health, or build the aforementioned shops and houses, and charms are incredibly useful accessories that provide a variety of different advantages and disadvantages that are either related to combat or exploration, such as increasing your attack and movement speed or showing you any remaining collectibles across the map. Finally, quest items are necessary to complete main and side quests offered by NPCs in exchange for valuable rewards and upgrades. Searching for all of these collectibles is highly recommended, since the resulting benefits they provide will be incredibly useful to your journey, which will become increasingly arduous the more you progress through the game, and nothing represents this challenge better than the platforming segments you will have to face. Bow, Path of the Teal Lotus is largely platforming oriented, something that it makes incredibly clear to you within its first hour. That being said, an additional thing that becomes immediately evident is that said platforming is meant to be quite challenging and elaborate, featuring increasingly difficult acrobatic segments the deeper you get into the story, until eventually you find yourself dashing and climbing and jumping your way through a wide array of treacherous sequences where one mistake can cost you a significant amount of progress. I have to admit that said platforming instances are the undeniable highlight and gauntlet of the game and require fast reflexes, snappy decision making, and perseverance in order for you to conquer them, but with a bit of patience, conquer them you will, in the process gaining an immeasurable sense of achievement since you truly feel like you've earned every inch you have managed to overcome. On a very basic level, platforming is founded upon a mechanic which has you hitting certain objects as well as enemies in order to bounce off of them and gain an additional jump in the process, which is essentially the game's version of a double jump. However, the more you progress through the adventure, the more your repertoire of movement abilities will grow, with said skills being seamlessly implemented into the progressively hellish ordeals of your adventure and resulting in amazingly fluid traversal sequences that, when completed, will make you feel like a godlike ninja. That being said, as much as I enjoyed the game's acrobatic segments, there are a few things to mention here that could have been better. First, I'll admit that, at times, failure felt incredibly punishing since many of the obstacles you will be called to overcome, such as spikes and fire beams, will send you back to the nearest checkpoint if you get hit, which, a lot of the times, means you will need to undertake a whole platforming segment from the start, something that can lead to frustration. This leads me to the second complaint, which is that I would have liked to have seen a few more checkpoints on the map when it came to these challenging segments, though I will admit that this issue did not come up often since, a lot of the time, checkpoints did exist but were hidden, though not always. Finally, there were a few times where I felt like the controls were somewhat unresponsive, for example by having Bo stop mid-jump, and other times where they felt over-responsive, for example with Bo immediately dashing away from a wall I had just landed on without me wanting to do that, though I'm not entirely sure whether that was the game's fault or me pressing something wrong accidentally, but I figured it was worth mentioning. Moving on to combat, Bo, Path of the Teal Lotus, chooses to play it safe with tried and true mechanics. On a basic level, Bo utilizes his staff in order to pummel his foes to oblivion by getting up close and personal. There's also the possibility for ranged attacks in the form of Daruma dolls, effigies of which you can only have one equipped at any given moment, with each one providing a different offensive ability. The damage output of your staff can be improved with the help of 2 blacksmiths as well as by equipping specific charms. Daruma dolls can be upgraded once each with the help of a certain NPC after you have acquired a specific item, which is highly recommended to do for the dolls you use since it truly elevates their firepower and can truly turn the tide of battles you may have thought lost. You can also permanently increase your health by purchasing ramen from a ramen shop as well as via charms. Staying on health, the game's healing mechanic requires of you to remain stationary for a few seconds while channeling energy you have obtained by hitting enemies, the amount of which is visible at the top left of the screen and whose limit cap can be permanently increased by purchasing upgrades from a tea shop since, essentially, the vessel used to hold said energy is an ornate teapot. In general, as far as combat goes, it is serviceable but nothing special and definitely not the focus of the adventure, though things can get quite intense when you have to duke it out with the game's bosses. Boss-wise, I have to admit that Bo Path of the Teal Lotus was a true emotional roller coaster, featuring some incredibly memorable big bads as well as some less impressive villains. The initial bosses you will get to face are really fun but relatively easy to overcome, with interesting movesets that introduce you to the mindset of the game's boss fight mentality by having you perform some limited acrobatics to take them down. Things, however, definitely escalate in the second half of the game, with some incredibly difficult battles where snappy reflexes and acute observation will be mandatory for you to win, culminating in some larger-than-life encounters that will test your speed, balance, and sometimes patience. I had a lot of fun clashing against the game's antagonists, with some of the final bouts definitely having been branded in my brain for their intense difficulty as well as the sense of achievement I felt once I managed to prevail. When it comes to difficulty, I think I've made it clear by now that Bo Path of the Teal Lotus is situated comfortably on the hard side of things, with platforming being largely responsible for this position. As much fun as I had conquering the acrobatic nightmares the game threw at me, especially in its second half, I do need to warn you that if a highly challenging platformer game is something that's not to your liking, Bo might not be suitable to your tastes, though take this with a grain of salt since difficulty can be largely subjective. In terms of length, it took me 10 hours and 20 minutes to finish the game with a 71% completion rate, with an estimated additional 2 to 4 hours for 100% completion based on your own skill level. For a price of about $20, I consider Bo Path of the Teal Lotus to be a worthwhile purchase if total completion is something you wish to pursue. In conclusion, I had a blast playing Bo Path of the Teal Lotus. I loved the mythical aspect of its story and the dreamlike quality of its presentation. I absolutely adored its platforming challenges. I had incredible fun dealing with the bosses and was hooked by the exploratory elements of the game. Difficulty can feel a bit unfair at certain points due to a lack of checkpoints that force you to undertake an arduous platforming segment from the start. Combat could have definitely been more fleshed out, and there was also this weird control issue I suffered on limited occasions, but it has been quite some time since I felt this sense of achievement once I've beaten a game, which, in my humble opinion, makes Bo Path of the Teal Lotus one of the most intense and worthwhile Metroidvania experiences of 2024. My final verdict on Bo Path of the Teal Lotus is 8.5 out of 10. What did you think about Bo Path of the Teal Lotus? Have you played it yet? Do you agree with the points I mentioned, or do you see things differently? Let me know in the comments below, and please subscribe if you enjoyed this video. As always, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, Soulsborne Seeker out!